Hi everybody, welcome back to Icelandic for Foreigners. In this video we're going to watch a short clip from an old Icelandic sketch show called Fóstbræður. And we're going to watch the clip and then we're going to kind of break it down and look at the dialogue line by line and try and understand what they're saying and what it's about and what makes it funny, or if it is funny, depending on your sense of humor. This show, it's fun to watch. You can find a lot of episodes on YouTube. It's actually really good practice if you're an intermediate or sort of advanced level, because they use a lot of colloquialisms like everyday speech, and also the speed, like it's kind of at a good normal talking pace. So it's really good listening practice, and it has that extra level of being, it's got humor in there, and it takes a lot of concentration to try and understand humor in a different language. It's very good practice, and it really is an important step to mastering the language. So it is really good practice for that. I don't vouch for everything that's on the show. There's a lot of content. You may find some of it offensive or inappropriate, so consider yourself warned. I can't vouch for everything that's on there, but this clip, there's nothing inappropriate or offensive about it. It's just it's pretty funny, and I hope it'll be good practice. So let's watch it, and then we'll come back and we will break it down.
Já, mér þykir mjög leiðilegt að þurfa að segja þér þetta, en í ljósi undangengina atburða og samdráttar í fyrirtækinu, þá bara komið að þér núna, og mér þykir þetta mjög leiðilegt, en þú ert rekinn.
Ég hvað, segir þú?
Þú ert rekinn.
Já. Og hvað þýðir það?
Það þýðir ekkert annað en það að þú ert rekinn.
Já. Ég þakka þér bara kærlega fyrir.
Já, þakka þér, sömuleiðis.
Jæja, hvað sagði hann?
Þetta var nú eitthvað furðulegt, maður.
Nú hvað?
Hann var bara eitthvað skrítinn, þessi maður.
Hvað sagði hann?
Hann sagði ég væri dreki.
Sagði hann það?
Já, þú ert drekinn, sagði hann. Hann kallaði mig dreka.
Furðulegt maður. Nákvæmlega það sama og hann kallaði mig í síðustu viku. Förum að vinna.
Já.
Okay, so let's take a look. I've got the transcript up here on the screen, and we have the Icelandic dialogue on the left, and then we have the translation on the right. Actually, the first thing that the first man says is the most complicated line of the entire video, so it'll take us a little bit of time to get through that, but after that it should be pretty fast. Okay, so we have two men looking at each other, right? And the first man says, Já, mér þykir mjög leiðinlegt að þurfa að segja þér þetta. So let's break this down. He starts by saying já, which of course means yes. But in Icelandic, the word já actually has a lot of different ways it can be used. And one of those ways is simply to introduce a new topic or to start a conversation. So you sit down across from each other and you say já. That's basically saying, we're here and I am ready to talk. So look out for the use of the word já by Icelanders. It has a lot more meanings than just yes. So, mér þykir mjög leiðinlegt basically means I feel very sad, or I'm sorry that. But what it literally means, so mér þykir, that is an impersonal verb construction. It means it feels to me, mér, to me. And we do that a lot in Icelandic to talk about feelings where it's like we don't feel them directly, but we experience them from some other source. Very common to say that. Mér þykir is a very common phrase. Leiðinlegt. One of the common meanings that it has is boring. Like you can say, like, school is boring, you know, and use the word leiðinlegt. Það leiðinlegt að vera í skólanum. But it can also just mean sad or regrettable, and it's often used that way. So that's what it means here. He's basically saying, I'm sorry. I feel bad. Að þurfa að segja þér þetta. To need to tell you this. In English we would say, I'm sorry, I have to tell you this. And you'll notice we say segja þér. Þér is the dative form of þú, and we use the dative form here because segja always takes a dative object for the person that we're telling the thing to. So, segja þér, I say to you. So, I'm sad to have to tell you this. En í ljósi undangenginna atburða. That's a pretty complicated construction. Í ljósi means in the light or in light. That's a very common phrase in English and in Icelandic, but if English isn't your first language, what that basically means is it's saying when we think about something, and it's basically saying, in this case, you know, when we think about recent events, that's what it means when we say in light of recent events, or when we consider recent events. So it's also common in Icelandic to say that, í ljósi, and then it's going to be followed by genitive. So undangenginna means recent or past events. It's the genitive plural form of undangengin, which means recent or past. So the form is undangengin. I'm just going to write it for a second because it's messing up my lines here. Undangengin, that's the nominative form. Funny enough, there isn't actually a verb undanganga, I don't think. And then atburða is the genitive plural form of the word atburður, which is the nominative form. So I'll write it just for a second here. Atburður, that's the nominative form. It's a masculine noun, and it means event. So in light of recent events. Og samdráttar, and downsizing. What that means in English and in Icelandic, samdráttur means it's when a company is too big or it has too many employees, so it has to fire some employees to save money. So he's saying because of recent events and downsizing, í fyrirtækinu, in the company. And that's the dative form. If you remember from my video where I talk about using accusative and dative with the verb or with the preposition í, when there's motion we use accusative, but when there's no motion we use dative. So when we're talking about in the company, there's obviously no motion. It's just what's happening inside the company. So we say í fyrirtækinu, that's the dative form. Okay, so in light of recent events and downsizing in the company, þá. Þá means then. It's used for like, you know, then, like that comes after something else. My cat's decided to come and join in the fun. But þá is also just used to say, like, to introduce the next part of the sentence. So if, then, or because of, then. It's just like, it's connecting your first idea to your second idea, and þá, you use it constantly. So he says, þá bara komið að þér núna, which literally means it is come to you now. And that's the Icelandic way of saying it's your turn. It's your turn. So we're about to find out what is his turn. So again, he says, mér þykir þetta mjög leiðinlegt. So he's being very polite, right? I'm very sorry to say this. En þú ert rekin. You are fired. Rekin, I put reka after in parentheses. That's the verb ad reka. It actually has a lot of meanings, including to like run into something. But in this case, it means to fire. And rekin is the adjective form, and it means to be fired. So that's the bad news. Þú ert rekin. So then we have man number 2 responds. He says, ég hvað segirðu? I'm what? Like you don't understand, and that's a common way to say, you know, that you don't understand, and you say segirðu, like what did you say? So he repeats, þú ert rekin. Man number 2 says, já, já, og hvað þýðir það? So this is another use of já. He's not saying yes like he's agreeing. I've noticed Icelanders, when they talk back and forth, they're very expressive when the other person is talking. Of course, it's good to be interested when the other person is talking, but they will show it in their gestures, and they'll say things like yao, yao, to show, I'm listening to you. So in this case, he's saying yao, yao. Basically, I hear you. Okay, I hear you. And then he says, o hvað þýðir það? What does that mean? And thida, you can use that verb, that verb to talk about like a literal translation, like what does this word mean? But you can also use it generally like he does here, like what are you trying to say? What do you mean? Hvað þýðir það? So his response, this is kind of a very fun Icelandic phrasing. He says, það þýðir ekkert annað en það að þú ert rekin. It means nothing other than that you are fired. It sounds odd in English, but it's not odd in Icelandic. Basically what he's saying is, you are simply fired. Or, I'm not trying to say anything except that you're fired. So, you are simply fired. You could another example where you could use this kind of construction is you could say, Hann ekkert annað en hetja. He is nothing but a hero, which is just like he is truly a hero. So, kind of a fun way that they say it in Icelandic. So now, man number 2, again, he says, yao, 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 right? And again, he's not saying, oh yes, I'm happy that I'm fired, or, great. What he's really just saying is, I see, I understand, right? And then he uses the word yaya, which it has actually a similar meaning. It's used to say, I've got it, or let's move on to the next topic. It's like saying, well, like let's talk about something new. So introducing a new topic. So yaya. Ég þakka þér bara kærlega fyrir. So this is the new topic. He's saying, well, thank you. And if we look at this phrase, ég þakka þér, we use þér, that's the dative form, because þakka, the person that we're thanking, is always in dative. So I thank you. Kærlega means dearly. Kær means dear. Kærlega, means dearly. So I thank you dearly. And you can say takk kærlega. That's very common. And then he says, ég þakka þér fyrir. In Icelandic, you've probably noticed you can say, I thank you for, or thanks for, and you don't even have to say what you're thankful for. You just say, thanks for. Takk fyrir. And that's what he does here. Ég þakka þér fyrir. And then the man responds, já, þakka þér sömuleiðis. Yes, thank you likewise. You'll notice one thing I want to point out about this sentence is he doesn't say ég þakka þér, which in general, Icelandic is not what's called a pro-drop language, meaning you don't usually have the option of dropping the subject from the sentence. You have to say I, basically all the time. Ég borða, I eat. Ég fer, I go. You don't get to say borða, I eat. But there are a few exceptions, and this is one of them. With the verb þakka, you can say þakka þér. Just like in English we say thank you. You don't have to say I thank you. Same thing in Icelandic. Kind of funny that way. All right, so that's the end of that scene, right, with these two men talking. So now we get to meet the third man. And his first line is jæja, hvað sagði hann? So here it is again, jæja. It's like introducing a new topic. Well, so, it's like tell me. Very common. So he says, hvað sagði hann? What did he say? Man number 2 says, þetta var nú eitthvað furðulegt maður. So this was something strange. Furðulegt, it's like strange, curious, puzzling. And then maður, kind of like we do in English, where you say like man or dude. It's just a way to address the person that's across from you. It's very common. So this was something weird, man. And the word nu, it means now. Here it doesn't really have like a very literal meaning. It's just kind of like a filler word. The sentence would mean the same thing if you said þetta var eitthvað furðulegt maður. But nu, they'll throw it in there, and as you hear Icelandic a lot, you'll kind of get a sense for when to do it or when not to do it. You probably never really need to do it in this context, but the next line is actually a little different, though, when he says nu hvað. In this case, nu actually does have a meaning, and it's often used to show like wonder at something that someone has said. So if someone says, I just got back from France, and you might say, no, and it's like, really? Or like, wow, very common. So he says, nu quath, like, really, what? This next phrase is a good one to kind of break down. He says, hann var bara eitthvað skrítinn þessi maður. So he was something weird, this man. You'll notice the funny thing about this is eitthvað means something, and it's like the neuter form, which you use for objects. But then skrítinn, he doesn't say skrítið, which is the neuter form. He uses skrítinn, which is the masculine form. So what he's really saying is this man was weird. He's not saying this man was a weird thing or something weird. So in this case, eitthvað actually is just an adverb, and it means pretty weird. Like, yeah, he was pretty weird. So hann var bara eitthvað skrítinn þessi maður. It's just the way that you use eitthvað as an adverb. And then þessi maður, he just uses that at the end to kind of reintroduce the topic of the sentence, just to redirect the attention to this man is the one I'm talking about. All right, man number 3. He says, "Hvað sagði hann?" Now, if you go back and rewatch this part of the scene, it's really hard to pick out these words. And there's a lot of part of it's because this guy is talking in a weird voice, right? Like he's kind of doing like a character. But actually, the way that he says this is how a lot of people would say it, and it's because there are a lot of sounds that are dropping out. So, for example, the word "kvað" in everyday speech often gets reduced to "kva." And if you remember my video about pronouns that start with the letter H, often the H, if it's not stressed, is going to drop out. So instead of saying "han," we're going to say "an." And because of that, the I at the end of sagði is going to drop too. So what he's actually pronouncing is this: "Kva sagðan." Kva sagðan. And this is how Icelanders would do it in normal everyday speech. They say "Kva sagðan" instead of "Hvað sagði hann." Part of learning to understand a foreign language, I mean, learning to understand when natives are speaking is really hard to do. But one thing that really helps is to almost like anticipate what they're going to say. So in this case, if you tell someone, if you set it up for a good story and you say, man, this guy was weird, there's a good chance that someone's going to say something like, why? Or what did he do? Or what did he say? And if you're almost like anticipating, like expecting that they're going to say that, then when they say it, you can like hear it better. You're more likely to be able to understand what they said. Okay, so hann sagði að ég væri dreki. This is more or less the punchline, these next few lines. So hann sagði að ég væri dreki. He said that I was a dragon. The only thing I want to point out grammatically here is ég væri dreki. That's the past subjunctive. If you go watch my videos about the subjunctive, I think it's in my subjunctive number 4, where I talk about the past subjunctive. We use the subjunctive when we have indirect speech. He said that I was. For some of you, this will be a very foreign concept. On the other hand, if you speak a language like German, then this won't be strange to you at all. But yeah, definitely go watch my subjunctive videos if that's confusing to you. So he said that I was a dragon. And we're still a little bit confused here as the audience, although it's becoming clear now that he clearly misunderstood what the man said. So again, sagði hann það, this line is very shortened again because it's the same thing that we saw earlier.
Sagði hann það?
Sagði becomes sagð, hann becomes an, sagðan, and then það becomes tha. And the reason sagði becomes sagð is because when an unstressed vowel at the end of a word is followed by a vowel at the beginning of the next word, it drops, which is what happens here. So sagði hann það, he said that. He's pretty amazed. And then here's the real punchline. Já, þú ert drekinn, sagði hann. Hann kallaði mig dreka. So yes, you're the dragon. So here's the joke, is þú ert drekinn, you are the dragon, and þú ert rekinn are pronounced virtually the exact same way. I mean, phonetically speaking, they are pronounced the same way. And that's because the T right here at the end of ert, when T is at the end of the word, it actually sounds the same as D at the beginning of the word. So, þú ert drekinn and þú ert rekinn if you pronounce them separately like that, you can clearly hear the 3 different words, and it's not confusing. But when you say them together like an Icelander would, "Þú ert drekinn," it's pronounced the same way. So you could hear "you're fired," or you could hear "you are the dragon." And then he's very amazed by this. "Hann kallaði mig dreka." He called me a dragon. He's so confused, right? And when you go think about the conversation now, it's very strange. I mean, it's no wonder he was so confused when this guy is sitting him down and saying, "You're the dragon." Of course, this wouldn't ever happen in real life because the context would clue you in. If this is your boss that's sitting you down and saying, "I'm very sorry," then he's probably not going to call you the dragon. But that's why it's funny, or not. Okay, and then the response, "Furðulegt maður." There's that word again, furðulegt, curious, weird, puzzling. "Nákvæmlega það sama og hann kallaði mig í síðustu viku." Exactly the same thing he called me last week. Nákvæmlega, exactly. Það sama would be the same thing. In Icelandic, when you want to say, the something, like the funny thing, or the confusing thing, or the same thing, you don't have a word for thing there. You just say the same, or the funny. So það sama means the funny thing. Það sama og hann kallaði mig. In this case, og doesn't really mean and, it means the same as. He called me last week. Í síðustu viku. Förum að vinna. Let's go to work. Yeah. So the second part of this joke, right, is this man was also fired last week, also misunderstood his boss, and thought that he was being called the dragon, and so he's still working there, even though it's a week later. So pretty silly. Anyway, let me know if you thought this was funny, if you thought this video was funny in the comments below. Also, let me know if you found this video helpful in the comments below. It's a fun show to watch to get some good practice. Watch at your own risk. But yeah, let me know what you think, and have a good one. Bless, bless.